All right, and I'm going to go over to my PC, no, to my UI. So what our goal for today is, our goal for today is to be able to, I mean, what we're really learning is this idea of recording a macro and then looking at the code that gets generated to be able to modify it. Because that's almost always what you have to do when you record a macro. Only for really, really simple things, you record the macro and then just use it. In fact, the term macro is probably one that deserves a little bit of discussion. I don't know why they use the word macro for this, but maybe we can kind of talk about the history of it real quick. So it turns out that it's the idea of electronic spreadsheet that gets personal computers to be taken seriously by humans. So it's a combination of a program, the original electronic spreadsheet was a program called VBA. Its successor, SuperCalc, when it was put onto the Apple II computer, was the first time that businesses looked at this thing called a personal computer and went, you know, we could probably use that. And the reason that became useful is they said, wow, with this electronic spreadsheet, I can buy a computer, a standalone computer that's used by only one person. They could run the budget for the company. This idea of being able to say, I've got a budget, if we change this up here, having all those calculations flow through, that was enough to say, that's how we really start using it. And it became pretty, and so that's how personal computers kind of get their way into businesses, is with the idea of electronic spreadsheet. And it didn't, you know, we weren't using them all that long before we realized that there's some things that we type the same characters over and over and over and over again. It's like the same keystrokes, you know, and we're getting really good at those keystrokes because we have to do them so often. And so the idea came, well, look, let's just go ahead and give folks the ability to record those keystrokes, and then they can go play them back. And this became known as a macro. Today we refer to it as a keyboard macro. And it worked really well because there was no mouse yet. And so it's just keystrokes, and literally you record those keystrokes and be like, okay, pick a cell where you want to put your keystrokes, and you pick the cell, you start recording, and you would just do something and just record all the keystrokes that happen. It would literally go into a cell. And when you wanted to run that macro again, you put make the active cell, that cell where your keystrokes were, and then you'd say, run the macro, and it would just go down the cell, and we play those keystrokes. And then the mouse came around in the, when did we start thinking the mouse? I'm thinking mid-80s or so. And for a long time, it was like, yeah, we can use the mouse, but you know, seriously do the spreadsheets, we're only using the keyboard anyway. Then there could be things you can only do with the mouse. And that got to be a problem for recording your macro. I remember when I was like a teaching assistant, I taught a class on how to use Macro Pro, which was the kind of the spreadsheet at the time, early 90s. And yeah, we're taught how to record macros in there, but okay, don't use your mouse. You got to know how to do all of it. Got to use the mouse to be able to do it. By 1995, Microsoft was like, you know, well, we got to get off the keystroke. That's when they invented VBA and integrated it into Excel. The idea was we're going to record a macro, but instead of recording the keystrokes to accomplish the task that we're going to do, we're going to record in the computer language what you're actually doing. So that's where we get this idea of recording what we're doing in VBA. So recording what we're doing in Excel, and then have that written in a computer language, VBA, for us to be able to go and edit. And so today's task, today's chore is to really cement this idea of recording ourselves doing something really complex, something that we couldn't just record and then redo. We couldn't just, no matter how good we were at it, we couldn't just record it and then play it over again. Record this, modify the code, go in and look at it, see what it did, modify it, and then make it, in fact, then ultimately make it happen over and over and over again until some condition tells it to stop. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a web query. So the idea is that we are going to start with a spreadsheet. And in fact, you can all start with this with me here. You know, I'm looking at the Mac version. If I could just remember how to zoom in on my Mac, which I have this beautiful Mac computer that the university gave me, and I barely ever use it. Zoomed in, that's a little bit better. Now, if I could just get back up here at the top. Okay, so I'm going to make a spreadsheet here. And the idea is, imagine that you've been hired, as an internship, and your job is to, like, every morning go collect some information online to see what's there. Can you imagine hiring a human to do this? say, we're going to send you to go get these. How many of you have ever been paid to do this? Where you say, you know what, I've got to go and pull information off the web. Just anyone here? We got, oh wow, so maybe not quite 5% of us here in the room, have done that. It's pretty common. I got to tell you, this former student who came back after the internship and told me the story. It was perfect. When I was listening to him at first, I was skeptical this would really happen. But by the time he finished telling the story, he convinced me. He went and took an internship at Amazon. Now, Amazon, of all the places that you would think, this is the place where they've got the competency to be able to automatically collect data from other websites online. Amazon's got to be, if they're not the best, they're not at it. They're close to the best in the world at it. And he said, yeah, my internship was every day I had a list of competitors. I had to go see what they were, kind of what their offering was on this particular set of products. And I said, they hired a person to do that? And he said, yes. He said, I started on Monday, and by Wednesday, I was ready to end it all. I mean, it was just so mind-numbing that, to just literally, it was go to this site, click, 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 yep, same as yesterday. Go to this site, click, 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 yep, same as yesterday. Go to this, that's what his job was. And I said, you're kidding me. And as he explained it to me, that's why I thought that he's making this up. It can't be true. Then, what he told me, yeah, it was for the digital camera. Digital cameras are a really different kind of product to compete with. All of their high-end camera producers, Nikon, Canon, Minolta, I don't know whoever else they are out there. They all have contracts that say if you want to be a retailer, you agree not to sell this product below this price. We're giving you a pretty good margin on it, but you are not allowed to say you can get $5 margin. That's the minimum that you can do. And so they do not compete by price. But what are you going to do if you're trying to compete in this market? You can't compete on price. What might be the other thing? You guys are probably really good at this. We'll probably have some MBA students in here who give this a lot of thought. So, what else? How else might you compete if you're not allowed to compete on price? Accessories. Ah, that's exactly right. Who said that? That's exactly right. So, did you know that's the way the digital camera market works? No, you're just smart. Great. So, yeah. So, listen, we can't change what we sell this for, but we can change what we throw in. So if you buy it from us at this price, we're going to throw in a camera, and we're going to throw in a flash, and we're going to throw in 5 or 6 memory cards, and I don't know what else you might throw in. And so the competitive landscape for digital cameras is really different than other things. Price isn't the main thing, like what the bundle is. And so the division had gone to their IT department there at Amazon and said, hey, we need to be able to check our competitiveness in this way. And they said, we can totally do that for you. It's going to take us about a year to put that together for you, and it's going to cost $100,000. What did they say? We'll hire interns. What did they say? And so this was this guy's job, like for the summer. He said by Wednesday, it was how to make it with an internship. And so Friday, he went home immediately from work. He worked the rest until late at night Friday. Worked all day Saturday. He said, Professor Allen, I even spent some time working on this on Sunday. I said, don't tell me, tell your bishop. And by Monday, he had written a program using VBA to do just exactly what he was doing by hand. So that he's there, he could have the ticker symbol that he was, or the competitive site that he was going to look at, go pull the information in and verify that it was the same as yesterday, and then just do it. Now, writing software for yourself to use is really different than writing software someone else is going to use, because it's the stuff that you wrote, and there's an error, you can look at the code and go, oh yeah, you adjust that and whatever. So, but he did what his boss thought would take a year and cost $100,000. He did in his spare time, like over the weekend. And so, what do you think? Do you think he got an offer there? Oh yeah, he totally got an offer there. In fact, that was the rest of his internship. Was going around and kind of doing that for other people. He said it was great fun. Way better than click. So and I asked him, well, did you tell him you had done that, or did you just do that and watch Netflix in your office? And he said, no, I told him. That's what I was doing. And so we got the offer. He said, I said, you can take a job? No, I'm not going to take it. I really don't want it. But then I kind of told the story the next year, and what we were doing, he ended up taking the job. But okay. So here's the other thing, kind of be careful. And that is that I had it was someone who wasn't even one of my students. but it knew that I had known how to do, automate stuff. And he'd taken a job here on campus. And the job was, they had this whole set of files that they had to like move to different directory and rename them according to this pattern. So they hired this guy to come in and kind of file by file, move it to its new place and change its name so that it kind of had the right information in it. And he said, we've got to be able to automate. And so he came to me and said, and in my mind, I thought, why would I help you? You've never taken my class. And whatever. And I thought, this is going to take me a little while to do. It's more interesting than what I'm currently working on. So I'd like to do it, but I need some reason to be able to help. And I needed some volunteer work done. Hey, come help me set up for the Colonial Heritage Festival and we'll do this. So he committed to that. So we spent maybe 3 hours, writing the program to do his internship. And said, hey, run into the problem and let me know. I didn't hear from him again until we're setting up at the Colonial Heritage Festival. I said, well, how'd everything go? And he said, well, about that, I ran that program and it took about, it was like 30 or 40 minutes to run, kind of go through and do it all. But then I went and said, okay, what else do you do? That's done. And he said, that's done. I said, yeah, that's done. You did it in the first week. I said, well, that's why we hired you, was to do that. I said, well, great, what's next? Nothing. There's nothing else to do. You're fired. And you are kidding me. You are kidding me. He said, no, that's exactly what happened. And he still came and helped set up, which was nice. But yeah, so I don't know, be careful. Maybe you should just let it run and watch Netflix in your office. I don't know. That would have been better for him, I think, in that situation. Okay. So here's the idea. Let me see if I can get back to column A. And let's just suppose that this is our task. See if Zoom is catching. Okay. So I'm going to have here a ticker in column A. And in column B, I'm going to have, let's see, why don't we do the price earnings ratio? And we'll do the earnings per share. Let's just give ourselves some stock tickers here. Why don't we say my favorite stock ticker, Southwest Airlines, LUV, feel the love. Apple, Google. Try that again. Microsoft, American Express, ExxonMobil, Ford, GM. That's enough. We got 8. No, but imagine that it's not 8. Imagine that it's 80 or 800. And your job is to go to boy, if you had to get the price earnings ratio and the earnings per share, like these current values for these tickers, where would you go to do it? And finance.yahoo.com, probably a really good choice. So I'm going to go there. Let's see. I think we've got a link on our page for the class today that's going to take us right to that particular page. And remember how to copy on a Mac. Now I think I got a copy. Well, now I got to get to the right program. Oh, I'm already on the right program. And paste. Okay, so boy, sign up to say I don't want to sign in. Now let's see. Command plus will zoom into all right, so right here we've got the price earnings ratio and the earnings per share, and that looks great. Now I'm not sure what to put on here on my URL. Kind of look at my URL here. And kind of here's the first thing that we're going to always be comfortable with is like, you know what, let's just fiddle around this URL and see if we simplify it a little bit, would it do the same thing? Because a lot of times what you get in the URL, part of the URL is kind of telling the system where you came from. And I'd like to simplify this just a little bit more. So I'm going to just backspace over that. And I think that even without that question mark on the end, I'm going to get there. And that's a little bit simpler of a URL. That's going to be great. So your job is come here, come down, and what are you going to do? You're going to find the price earnings ratio. You're going to copy that. You're going to go back to Excel, paste. You're going to come back here, copy this, go back to Excel, paste. One down, only 799 left to go. And unfortunately, you get a break for lunch. So, but what's the real problem with having the human do this process? What's the problem here with this approach? Go ahead. Yeah, it's going to take longer, but that's not the big problem. The big problem is, where will your mind be while you're doing this? it will be somewhere else. It really will be somewhere else because you can't focus on this after you do the first 2 or 3. Your mind will be thinking about something else. And so you're gonna make a mistake. And if we end up now making business decisions because you pasted in the wrong earnings per share, that's gonna be a problem. And so we really love to be able to automate this. So that's the chore to do. Now we're going to rely on a tool in Excel called the Web Query Wizard. How many of you have used it? Web Query Wizard. Oh, so just a few of you. So this is going to really be exciting because we can actually have Excel go to this web page and pull all the information from that web page right onto a worksheet. And we can make that happen automatically on the Windows version of Excel. Now, on the Mac version of Excel, can't do it. Except I wrote an add-in for you to do it with. And so if you're on the Mac, let's just go ahead and install this add-in right here. So here's the legacy web query. Oh, you might have the new web query. There's actually, so the legacy web query is kind of the first version of this. And when we record ourselves doing something with the legacy web query, it gives us really simple VBA codes. There's the newer web query, it's a little bit more powerful, it's a little more up to date, it's a little bit better, but the code we record, we're not ready to really parse that code until later in the term. But I want to get this example down now. So we're going to use kind of the older one. So what we're going to do, we're just going to download this file. And then once we have that downloaded, let's come into Excel. If you're on Windows, it's already built in, don't have to worry about it. Check your email. If you're on Mac though, what are we going to do? We're going to come to the developer tab. And then we're going to come to Excel add-ins here. And then we will just browse and find the file where you downloaded it, select it, and then you'll have the legacy web query add-in here. So you'll say, okay. So remember, on the developer tab, once you've downloaded that file, on the developer tab, you're going to choose Excel add-ins and then browse to find where you downloaded that. Oh, no, I don't think you have to enable it. I think it'll just work okay in Mac. And once you've done that, then on the data tab, you should, I'm going to maximize this. On the data tab, you should have this tool right here called Legacy Web Query. And before you run that, I'm going to make a new tab for this. Let me rename this sheet. I'm going to change the name here from sheet 1 to tickers. And I'm going to make a new sheet, and I'm going to call this one Web Query. Okay, so now Mac users, you're with me. Let's go ahead and click on Legacy Web Query. It says enter a URL. The query will be placed in the active cell. Whoops, going to get in the active cell. So let me come up here to A1 on my sheet here, my web query sheet. Okay, so before we do this, does anyone need help getting any Mac users need help getting that web query wizard installed? A few of you here, let's just go ahead and quickly take a look at this. Folks, if you successfully did it, you're able to kind of help someone else that needs to handle it, take a look. New TA. Yeah, I think that's a good anyone else? Yeah. All right. So, because I wrote this add-in, it already has the URL that I want for this example. So that's great. You can just say okay. And it's going to put that query right there in A1. Okay, so the page that it's going to is like random.org. It's a page that is going to give us some random data. The whole reason here is that you'll see it doesn't really matter what we start with, because we're going to change it when we get into the code. But down here, I think, yeah, down here around line 90, we've got some random passwords generated. The whole point here is not that we just went and imported that data, but this is a query. This is something that I can refresh and it'll make a new poll to the website. So I'm going to come to on my data tab where it says refresh all, and we're going to watch this data change here because it's making a new request out to random.org, and it's pulling back that new web page, and it's showing the web page on my worksheet. It doesn't look very good, but we're after the data, so we don't really care how it looks. Okay. Now, one more thing I want to show you is that when you run that, it actually puts some code into your immediate window in VBA. So let me just point that to you because we're about to go back to the Windows side and kind of do that part again for our Windows users. So let me come to Developer and Visual Basic and maximize that. Okay, so down here, you can't really read it, that's okay. But this is the code that we're going to need. We're going to record ourselves generating this code on the Windows side. Because you don't have a Microsoft tool for this, it won't record yourself doing it, but this is the code that you're going to need. So if you're not seeing the immediate window, then you're going to come up to the top and you're going to choose View, Immediate Window, and then you'll see it. View Immediate Window, you'll have that code. So we'll need to have you copy that code and bring it in just a bit. So other Mac users, any questions? We're about to switch to Windows. Okay. So I think I'm done with that. Mac, let me come back to PC. All right. I'm going to close that. I'm going to get on the right keyboard. Save it. Okay, now I got to do that same thing, but let me go ahead and share the screen so that we actually record the screen. Turn off the camera. Stop video. Share screen. Share screen too. Oh yeah, okay, religion. Okay, let me just kind of quickly go through that again. So we're here. I'm going to name this sheet tickers. We're going to make another one here called web query. Ticker. Was it earnings per share or what was price earnings ratio? EPS. And order doesn't really matter. Or yeah. They get the same ones? Okay, they get them in the same order. Okay. Okay, so now I think I've got this set up. So I'm ready to kind of introduce you to the web query wizard. Now, if we come over here to the data tab, there's a thing here called from web. So this is the new web query wizard, and in a month, you'll be ready to do the process that we're about to do using the new web query wizard. It's going to generate code that's more complex than I want to deal with today. So we're going to use the old school one. And we're going to get to that one by just coming up to the search bar in Excel and typing in web. And you'll see from web legacy. I don't think there's a way to get to this tool now through the menu, through the ribbon, the way that there used to be. So now we're going to use this legacy one. So it turns out when they first wrote the web query wizard for Excel, it was like either the late 90s or the early 2000s. I mean, it was a different world for the internet. And so, oops, I lost it. So I'm going to click on from web legacy. And it's actually going to open up a little browser right here inside of Excel. Listen, if all your other browsers broke, you could come and use this browser that's in Excel. It's not very good. And what it's really not good at, it's not good at handling active content. So back when this thing was written, it was like you asked for a web page and the web server sent you the page. You know, the data you wanted to see, there it was. But then we got all this JavaScript and this kind of active content. And now what's really common is the web server will send you a page and we'll send you some code on there that will say, now go get the real data. Like we sent you the page, but you're actually getting the data, is making the request from the browser to go and get more data to build that page. And they just never really updated this, and that's okay because the problem is not with the functionality of the web query, it's with the wizard itself. So once we get past the wizard, we're going to be just fine. So I'm just going to say no, don't keep running scripts on this page. And I think if I click no enough times, it will really stop running them. Okay. So now, be careful not to move my mouse over the top of that because it might run code because the mouse is moving somewhere. So let me come back to copy that same URL that we did for the Mac. And then I'm going to paste that in here. So that's where I'm going to tell this to go. Unfortunately, that okay, I had to click on the little stop button to actually get it to where it would let me to paste in. I'm going to paste, and then I'll say go. Now, this random.org one is pretty simple. I'm gonna ignore this thing about cookies here. That's okay. The reason we're using random.org is because they don't have a lot of active script. So the web query, once you get here, the web query wizard is going to be okay. And yeah, okay, yeah. So I'm going to import this. Now, I got to get this over onto my web query page. Oh, I spelled it finally over here, but fortunately, this is going to ask me where I want to put it. So I probably should have been on A1 of my web query page before I got there. But let me come over here, select A1, because this tool is going to let me select where I want it to go. Existing worksheet in that location. Great. I'm going to say okay. And it's now going to build that query. It'll get us to exactly the same place as we were with that other add-in that we did with the Mac folks. Right. So here's that same data. And we can see here is whatever they've put in here, and now I should be able to hit refresh and see those changes. So we can see. Looks like it's a little bit different because this isn't password. It almost passwords. Anyway, the point is when I hit refresh all, that query object is there. I can say refresh, and it says go back to that same URL, bring that page in, and dump it back onto my worksheet again. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now, the problems that we had with it were just with the wizard getting to this point. Once the query is built, it's going to be just fine. Okay, questions on where we are so far? Now, what we want to do is we want to record ourselves getting the information for one of these stock tickers and modifying our web query. That's when we'll change the URL for that web query. And then we're going to kind of take us through that far. So here's what we're going to do. We come back to the tickers page. And I want all of us to do this together now. Mac, Windows users together. We're now on the same page. We come back to my ticker symbol now, or my tickers page. Maybe I'll rename web query to actually be spelled right here. So, okay. Now, so the idea here is I want to record myself doing this once. I want to record myself choosing one of these tickers and going and getting that information, bringing it into Excel, and then bringing the two pieces of information that I want over here to my name sheet. And then, once I've done that once, I'm going to tell VBA to do that over and over and over and over again. So I got to record myself doing it once. Now, anytime I record myself doing a macro, recording a macro, I want, whenever I record myself doing something in Excel, whenever I make a macro, record a macro, I always want to think about two things before I start. The first one is, when the user runs this macro, where should their active cell be? And that's where I want the active cell to start when I start recording. And when the user is done running this macro, where should the active cell leave off? And I want to make sure that I go there when I'm done with the recording. So if I'm thinking about this, which cell should be the active cell when the user runs the macro to get information for one of these tickers? On this worksheet, which cell should be the active cell? Yeah, the ticker you want to find. So it doesn't really matter which one it is. Could be any of these. So I'll start on this one. Now, after we've gotten the data for one of these, what should the active cell be when we're done? The next one down, right? So that I'm just ready to run it again, and run it again, and run it again. Okay, so I think we're in good shape. We're ready to start recording. Now, to record ourselves doing this, I'm going to come to my developer tab. That's right. This machine just got refreshed. So I got to get that developer tab up open again. So we've done this before, but if you happen to need to get the developer tab still, you just joined us. We'll go ahead and do it together. I'm going to choose File, come down to Options. I'm going to come to Customize Ribbon, File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and just check the developer tab. Okay, so now that I have my developer tab showing, I'm going to come to here where it says Record Macro. Now, I got to be careful when I click that Record Macro button, because everything I do, once I click Record, everything I do is it's going to be recorded in VBA. Well, the truth is, even before I click Record, everything I do is being recorded in heaven. Now it's going to get recorded in Excel as well. So we're going to be on our best behavior. So I'm going to click Record Macro and say, what do you want to call this? I'm going to give it a name. This is going to be, I guess I'll just call it like stock ticker, stock. I'll call it stock info. Now, I can't put no spaces allowed. It's got to be letters, numbers, and the underscore character. They're the only things allowed to be in the name, and it's got to start with a letter. So this is going to be okay. Oh, hey, look at this. I can assign a shortcut key to this macro. Hey, okay, so let's see, stock info, I think should call it S. Control S. That sounds familiar. What does Control S do? Not anymore, it doesn't. Now Control S runs this macro. Okay, you see why you need to be careful about this? You see why you don't want my mother even knowing that there's a developer tab in Excel? You know, it would be great. She would name a macro Control P or something. Every time I try to print now, this other thing happens. I don't know what's going on. Have you been playing with VBA again? Oh, yes. So instead of putting an S in there, by the way, every keystroke is mapped already. Like Control, every letter is mapped, except for one, and that's Control M. In my mind, I suspect that's supposed to be for your macro, Control M, and run my macro. So you can use Control M, or you could put in an uppercase S, and that will magically change to Control plus Shift plus S. I don't know what Control plus Shift plus, I've never done that. It might mean something in Excel anyway, but I've never used it, so I don't mind overriding it. It means something else. Yeah, there are some hotkeys that are like Control Shift something. And the only one I ever use is like in Word. That Control Shift E, I think, turns on and off some kind of like review mode or something. Question over here.
If you like write over another command or whatever, is that just in this worksheet? Or
oh, what would happen if you overwrote a command? You'd have to reinstall your operating system. No, not really. As long as the workbook is open, that you have that mapped keystroke on, like it doesn't have to be the active workbook, but if it's open, then when you press that hotkey, it will run that macro.
Well, once you close it,
once you close this worksheet, Control S would still save any other worksheet. In fact, one time I was teaching, it was like the late 1990s, came out in 95, and I was teaching this stuff like in the corporate world, traveling around the country, teaching people how to program in VBA like by 96. I think I actually started in 95. Anyway, I was teaching, probably shouldn't say the name of the company because we're recording. I was teaching Blue Cross of California. And had me come out to teach people how to do it. And we had, I'm not really sure if that's who it was. That's the one that comes to mind. But it was a class of like 15 people. They all had their computers there. And we had someone in the class who was like the person that like always had annoying comments to make about almost every topic. Have you ever had a class that had that person in class? Raise your hand. Yeah, every single class I ever had a person like that. Why? It was me. I was the guy in the class. But now I'm teaching it. We got the guy in the back. And we had just gotten to, we reviewed how to close a workbook through code to close a workbook and automatically save the changes. Without prompting, just your code is going to close the workbook, save the changes. And this guy asked the question, what would I do? What code would how do I change this to make it close the active workbook, not prompt the user, and not save the changes? Just throw the changes away without prompting the user. And I said, there's nothing good you could do with that code, but it was like changing one parameter from true to false. And that was it. So I told him that, and we kind of moved on. About 3 minutes later, he goes, yes. He said, well, I just wrote a macro that closed the active workbook without saving the changes, without prompting the user. And I assigned it the shortcut key of Control S. And we did this kind of laugh. We did a laugh similar to what you just did. And we moved on. This is a day-long class. A couple hours later, it's time for lunch. I said, all right, let's break for lunch. Go ahead and save your work. And he goes, what? Oh. And he left the workbook open. It wasn't what he was working on, but the workbook was still open. So when he went to go save it, it invoked his other macro and it dumped off all the work he'd done. The rest of us had a good, really a good belly laugh, I think, when that happened. Okay, so you got to think about the shortcut key. Now, where are you going to store the macro? You got three options here. Every other time we do this, we're going to put it in this workbook. But let me tell you the other two possibilities. So one, you could say, put it into a brand new workbook. That could be handy if you have to record something on a workbook that you don't have access to the VBA code. Like you could be like working with a workbook that has VBA project that's password protected. And if you record it into that workbook, you'd never be able to get to it. And so you could say, just put it into a brand new workbook, or you could put it in your personal macro workbook. Let me tell you what that is real quick. So your personal macro workbook. So first of all, any macro that you have can be run from any other workbook as long as that workbook is open. If the workbook's open, you have access to the macro that's in it. It has to be open in Excel. And so you might think, yeah, I've got a bunch of tools that I use all the time. I kind of keep them in a workbook here. That when I need those tools, there's a workbook, and I'm using them on other workbooks. There's a code that I want to read. Well, they said it's common enough that we're going to automate that. So the first time you record a macro and put it in your personal macro workbook, it's going to create a new workbook. It's called personal Excel. And this one, we need the XLSP, the binary form, slightly more efficient format, but the same thing. But what it's going to do is that every time after that, every time you open Excel, it will automatically open that workbook. So this would be like the tools are just always available. And you can go in and edit them and delete them and change them and everything. We're not going to do that, but I just want to let you know that's what that is. So if you're thinking, I've got some code I just always want to have available to me, then that's where you would put it. We're going to put it right into this one. And I'm going to say, okay. Now, I wish I had done this part before I had started, but you guys just stay where you are, but I am going to bring up my Visual Basic editor here so that we can see the code as it executes. We can see the code as it's recorded. Okay, so it has already created that new module. Oh, and again, this thing just restarted. So let me just take a minute and configure this so you can see it. Options, editor. Looking for Microsoft, Sans Serif, MS Sans Serif, Western. 24. That's macro you can see. I'm bigger than I really want. Okay. We're recording. I'm over here on my Excel part here, and I do not need to do that. I'm gonna have to delete that. You're okay right there. So I'm going to go ahead and select this because I'm on the active cell. So I just clicked on it to activate Excel. I didn't think it would actually record it, but it did. So it recorded. That's how we would select a cell. That's the code to select a cell. Ultimately, I'm going to want to get rid of that. My next step is going to be to copy. So I'll come over here and choose File. No, how do you copy? Control C, but I can do it here. Control. These is copy. Copy. Right. And so there we start record the line. Selection.copy. Whatever selected, just copy it. And now I'm in cut copy. I'm in cut copy mode. Excel's in cut copy mode. We got some little flashing like lights around your cell here. Right? Things behave differently in cut copy mode, right? What happens now if I press enter? What will enter do? Yeah, enter will paste. It's because I'm in cut copy mode. Okay, but I don't want to paste yet. I want to go to web query. So watch what happens. I'm going to select the web query sheet, and you're going to see it, record the line for web queries. That's how we do it. And this is the way that the language works, right? It's objects. Remember, objects are things. Objects have two characteristics we're really interested in. They are what? One is a property, that's something that describes the way the object is. One is a method, that's something the object knows how to do. And so here, when I said, let's do selection.copy, so the selection object knows how to take its contents and put it onto the clipboard. And so this is a method. And so object.method. This one says out of all the sheets, there's one called web query. Everything up to here identifies a particular object, and then we're calling the select method. That object knows how to make itself the active range. So it's doing what it knows how to do. Okay, now oh shoot, I'm going to go to A1. If I scroll to go to A1, it's going to record, scroll up, scroll up, scroll up. I don't want to do that. I could delete it, but I don't want it there. How can I go to A1 just by pressing a keystroke? What is it? Yeah, control home. So I'm over here, I'm going to press control home. That's going to take me up to A1. Oh, I meant to put this in A2. I meant this query to be in A2. Folks, let's start again. Okay, we're going to start again. So I'm going to stop recording. I'm going to come back to my developer tab. I'm going to stop recording. I'm going to delete this. No, let's just leave it there. I don't want you to have to go do that. We'll give it a different name this time around. But let's begin by inserting a line here because I want to be able to paste into A1 without affecting that web query. So I am going to insert. I am going to insert. There we go. Control plus. If I have the line, the whole row selected plus control plus, that inserts. I guess I could right click and choose insert as well. But, so that's where I want to be able to paste. Okay, so we're gonna take. I'm going to do this again. Back to my tickers. I'm on the right ticker. I'm going to start recording. Developer, record macro. I'm going to call this. That was stock info. Call this one stock data. And I'm going to do this one. I'm going to put a capital P in this. We have the PE ratio and the earnings per share. There's a lot of P's involved there. I'm going to do this control P. And I guess for a comment here, I'll just put data from Yahoo. Okay. Now you can see we've got stock data. And anything that starts with a single quote is just a comment. So it tells us the keyboard shortcut is Control Shift P. In case you missed it, 2 lines above, this is the stock data macro. And there's the comment that I put in. Okay, so I'm copying, selecting my web query, selecting A1. Now, also let me click on A1 to select A1. I want to make sure I get the A1 in there because if I already was on A1, I do want to make sure it goes into A1. So I'm going to A1 and then I'm going to paste. I'm going to use enter to paste. If you use control V, you probably haven't got the cut copy mode false yet. And that's okay, don't worry about it. But we can see that when I pasted, it said active sheet paste. So the sheet object knows how to paste. When you paste to the sheet, it will paste it into whatever cell is active. And then it took me out of cut copy mode. That'll happen automatically. Oh, it doesn't even really need to be recorded, but it does, and that's fine. Okay, so now I'm going to record myself editing this web query. Mac folks, we are about to generate some code that you already have in your immediate window. So Mac folks, don't record this. Windows folks, we're going to come here. I'm going to select the cell where the web query is, A2. I'm going to right click and choose edit query. And it's going to bring that query right back up in my web query wizard. Now, the tempting thing to think is that if I still had that ticker symbol here, like I could paste the whole URL in here and I would record getting that URL. But remember when I told you that the macro recorder is going to record everything I do? It wasn't entirely true. I get to a dialog box like this. It's going to say, oh, a dialog box. I can tell you a little personal time here. I'll avert my eyes. And it doesn't pay attention to what you do in that dialog box. When you press OK, or in this case, import, it's going to look at how you have it configured. It's going to say that's what you want to do. And so even if I was to do an activity here that pasted the right ticker symbol on the URL in there, it wouldn't record it. It would just get the static URL when we're done. So I'm not even going to try to go to yahoo.com right here because it's an active page that's going to struggle with this. And so all I'm going to do is say import. So all I did here was I invoked it, and now I'm going to say import. And what I'm doing is I'm generating the code that I need to be able to modify that web query. Okay, so here's my code. We'll come back and look at it. But here's my code that says, we've modified that web query. Now, at this point, I'm going to stop recording. We're going to pick up recording again. Let me stop recording here. And we're going to modify this code so that it will actually bring in the right information. Now, Mac users, find your immediate window and just copy that information in. So right where we have this, you've got a much shorter version. It only has 2 lines in the block. So just put that right after the a2.select. Let's take a look at what this says. Now, the first thing that we see a structure we haven't seen before. It's this thing called with and end with. You can see that the lines sometimes get really long in VBA. Like if I'm trying to refer to a particular cell in a different sheet, in a different workbook, in a different instance of Excel, to get to that cell, I would have to say, refer to that instance of Excel, refer to a particular workbook in that instance, and this is, well, why is it getting longer? Refer to a particular worksheet on that workbook, and then refer to the range. It could be like this long to get to the cell that I want. And so it says, listen, if you're going to do a bunch of things with an object, then we'll do this. Identify an object here with this object. Then any line that starts with a dot, it's just like saying, you know what, put this in front of the dot. It's just a shorthand notation. Truth is, I wish we didn't have to deal with that. It's kind of a little more complexity here, but that's what it is. Now, and then when we get to the end with, say, okay, yeah, we're no longer working with that object. It's just kind of back to normal rules. Okay, and so this is the rule one that we're after, because this is telling us what the connection is. Now, this first part of this string, remember that, in fact, this probably bears a little bit of discussion for us here, and that is when my macro interpreter, when my VBA interpreter looks at this code, it says range. It's got to figure out what I mean by range. It's going to go, range, what is that? Is that like some statement built into VBA? And it goes, no. Is it a variable? No. And finally, you kind of look around at a couple of things and we go, oh, this is an object on the active sheet. You're talking about the range object. It's got to figure out what that means. It looks at active sheet and it has to figure out, what is that? Oh, that's whatever, it's a reference to whatever worksheet is active. Now, if we have something that we don't want the interpreter to try to understand, we put it in double quotes. So this web query right here, our interpreter doesn't have to understand what that means. All our interpreter has to do is send those characters, WEBQUERY, to the method of the active of the sheet, the select, so that it knows what to do. The method knows what to do with those characters. The VBA interpreter doesn't have to understand them. And that's really what we're doing down here. We're saying, listen, VBA, don't try to understand what this means. Is there some computer that can understand what that means? Yeah, a browser could understand that, right? But we're saying VBA, you don't need to understand this. So just keep track of those characters. And so we put those in quotes. Having them inside the double quotes tells VBA, just keep track of these characters. You don't have to figure out what they mean. They don't mean anything to you. They're for somebody else to understand. Okay, so that's what's called a string literal. It is literally just this collection of characters. This first 3 characters here says this is a web query. So a query can be a lot of different types of query. It could be database query, it could be, I guess there's some other kind of query, and the only 2 that I really know about. But this is the one that says this is a web query, and this says, you know, this is where you're going. So let's go ahead and pull in the URL that we actually want. And that's on our little example page for today. And I'm just going to very carefully replace just the URL. So the semicolon there, I'm leaving that semicolon, and I'm just going to replace everything else. And so now, when we're changing this web query, we're saying, I might have been looking at random.org, but not anymore. This web query is looking at finance.yahoo.com. Now, you'll notice that which ticker is it looking at? It's looking at Apple. I don't want to look at Apple every time. What do I want to look for? Whatever stock ticker that I put where? In A1. That's the whole reason I copied it, was to kind of get that into the place that I was ready to use it for with this web query. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete over Apple, and I'm going to concatenate on, use the ampersand symbol, the same symbol you would use inside of a cell. Something we can use from our extensive knowledge of Excel. It's going to concatenate. I'm going to just take those characters, and I'm going to glue on. Now, how do I refer to range A1? It's on the screen. How do I do it? Yeah, range, open. Okay, range, open parentheses, open quote, A1. Now, dot select is the method. I don't want the method, I just want the object. So I'm going to say, take that quote and concatenate on whatever's in A1. Now that's the whole object. I want a particular property of that object. Which property do I want? The value, that's right. So this says, just use that URL, you're going to build onto it, whatever value you have here in A1. All right, now, I'm going to get us on the same page with our Mac users. The rest of this stuff is like just the way that thing was already formatted, right? The only thing I want to change here is the URL. So I'm going to get rid of the rest of this. This line right here, command type equals 0, that's like a bug in the macro recorder. Like this will cause your code to fail. They introduced that in like 2013 around. It worked before that and then it quit working. So we have to delete that one. I'm going to go ahead and delete the rest of these down until the refresh, because this one is just saying, okay, you've made this change. Now refresh the query. That's the part that's telling you to go back and get the data from the web server. Background query, if the background query is true, it says, hey, just let that, while that's running, keep your VBA running. Just let that query run in the background. No, we don't want it to run in the background because we want to wait here until that page comes back because we got to get the data. Go get the data before it's back, we'll get the old data. So by telling it background equals false, background query is false, it's going to pause my VBA here until that page is fully loaded, and then I'm ready to go into the data. Whew. That was a lot of talking. What did we do? We changed the URL and made it dynamic so we could build it based on what that, and we deleted those other things. But I think at this point, this will now pull in the right data. So let's just go ahead and play with this. I see that it works. So if I look at my web query, I got this. I got my lottery quick pick. Well, that's great. Dice roller, coin flipper. I hope I'm not leading you to a life of gambling by this example. Let me come back here now and let me choose. I'll choose Google. Press Control-Shift-P. I assigned the keystroke of P. So that should run. Oh no. We're supposed to stop recording. I'm going to stop recording now. Stop. All right, let's go back and find out what do I do. Okay, yes, I'm just going to delete everything after that end with. Okay. Stop recording. I forgot to stop recording. Now we've stopped recording. One time I was recording a macro at work, and my wife called. It was early in the morning. My wife called me, and there was some plumbing problem. I had to find a plumber and whatever. It took me a while. After I was done with that, I went back and I forgot what I was doing. I was recording a macro. I forgot what I was doing. And I worked for the next 3 or 4 hours just in Excel. And then I went, oh, I'm recording a macro. And I went, it was a really long macro. Great. I thought, wow, what a macro. Okay, so I have stopped recording. Let's come back here. Oh, I flew a little hairbrained today. I had dashed across, I was over at the law school this afternoon. I had to dash across campus to get here in time. All right, no excuse. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think we're okay. I'm going to go ahead and run this again. Let's see what happens. I'm going to go to Microsoft and I'm going to Control-Shift-P, go and get the data. It should leave me off on the sheet there once the data is brought in. Okay, yeah, so all that stuff about gambling is gone. We've got now news, finance, sports, entertainment. Scroll down here, I should be able to find the information. Here it's about, let's see, where is it? Price earnings ratio, line number 109. Anyone have a price earnings ratio on line 109? You're exactly the same line as me. Oh, so few. Anyone have the price earnings ratio on a different line than 109? You're probably close though. What do you have? 104. What else you got? 107. 107. So somewhere around there. So what that means is that this page, it's not just the data that's changing, but it's changing enough when I refresh it that it's coming into a different location. That's not true for all pages. Like that random.org, those numbers are coming in exactly the same place every time. But this one, it's going to come in. We're not going to be able to say, go and get it off that cell. We have to figure out which cell it's in. That's going to be okay. We're ready to do it. But we've got that ready to go. So where was I? I was, let me do this. I'm just going to copy onto my clipboard right here. Price earned PE ratio TTM. I'm just going to copy that, not the whole cell, but just the text. I'm going to come up and just copy that. You could type this, I guess. I'm not so good at typing, so I'm going to have that copied. And where was I when I was last recording? I think I was on A2. I'm going to come back to A2 and I'm going to pick up recording here. Because the next what I want to do is I want to find where it says price earnings ratios. And I want to go copy that, go back to my other sheet, paste, come back, get the next one, copy it, go back, paste, and then we're done. So I'm ready to kind of pick up on recording. So my macro copies, it gets me set up, it pulls the data in. And now I'm going to kind of pick up there. It used to be that you could say, hey, I want to record some new steps into here. They took that tool away. So now it'll record another macro and we'll just merge them. It'll be really simple to do. Okay, so I'm ready to start recording again. Back to my developer tab. I'm going to come to record macro. And it wants to call it macro 3. That's great. Because I'm just going to use the code out of this now. I'm not going to use this macro. So no shortcut key, anything. I'm going to say okay. Okay, so now the first macro has gotten the page, it's got the data loaded. Now I want to find what I'm after. So I'm going to press Control F. Find. And I'm going to paste. And if you didn't copy, that's okay. Just type in just exactly that way. Case sensitive and everything. In fact, I'm going to come to options and I'm going to say match case, match entire contents of the cell. This might work okay just to look for PE ratio. It doesn't have to find the whole cell and it would find it just fine. But what I would be worried about is what would happen if, like next time I refresh this page, there's some news story about some company misstating their price earnings ratio. Or they misstated their earnings and so it affects their price earnings ratio and there's some story about that. I don't want that to accidentally get down somewhere higher on the page. I want this to be as constrained as certain as possible. I'm going to match the whole contents of the cell and I'm going to match the case. It's got to be exactly this. And I'm going to say find next. And it has taken me right down to the line. It's got just barely close to where I want to be. I want the next one over. Don't touch it yet. If you think you know what to do, don't do it. Because what's going to happen if I click on B109? What will my macro recorder record?
Always go to that.
It's going to go to B109. I don't want to go to B1. I want to go one cell to the right. Now you have an idea of this already from working with your formulas in Excel, because you have the notion of an absolute versus a relative reference, right? If you've got an absolute reference, it goes right there all the time. If you have a relative reference, it depends on where you copied it to. It'll kind of move the reference down. There's the same notion in recording a macro. And I can kind of toggle those back and forth while I'm recording. So right up here, right below my record button, which now says stop recording, I'm going to come to where it says use relative references. I'm just going to push that on. It's going to stay on. It's like it's now selected. So now when I click on this, watch what it records over here. Oh, there's the finding thing. We'll pay attention to that here in just a minute. But now watch what happens. I'm going to click on B109 and it doesn't record go to B109. It says from the active cell, offset 0 rows in 1 column. And then select that. This range A1, how I wish it didn't put that in there. Let me explain this to you really quick. If I had clicked on here and selected a whole range, not just one cell, then it would say from that starting point, go from like A1 to C4. It's like it pretends that the cell that you're on is the upper left-hand corner of the worksheet. And it would let you record, it would let you select a whole range. It's a really weird thing because it's saying, hey, if the range that before it was the upper left-hand corner, what would this be? So when this says A1, it has nothing to do with A1. It's just saying the cell that you had selected. Couldn't they have gotten rid of that when I record a single cell and just taken that part out? I wish they did, because it would work the same if we didn't even have that part in it. But that's why it's there. It's kind of unfortunate that it's there, but this is it. We're working with the code that gets generated. Okay, so now I've selected that. I'm ready to copy. Control C. So there it is, selection.copy. Let me go ahead and hit the tickers page and you're going to see it. Go back to the tickers page. Now, where do I want to go? Do I want an absolute reference or a relative reference here? Relative reference, good news. I'm still on use relative references. So I'll click the next one over and it's going to say from the active cell, refer to one more over and then select that cell, make that the active cell. And now I'm going to paste, Control V. I'm going to go back to my web queries sheet. Now, should I search for EPS TTM or just go down? If I was worried that something else might all of a sudden appear in the middle of there, I probably should do a search for it. But I'm just going to go down. I'm pretty sure it's going to always be the cell below. We'll go down. So it's saying, hey, we're going to select a cell that is now offset from the active cell, 1 row down, 0 columns. And then select that cell. Now I'm going to copy that one. I'm going to go back to tickers. I'm going to go over 1, taking me over 1 more. I'm going to paste. And now I'm done, right? No, what's next? Go to the cell that I want to end off on. So I'll come back here. And you'll see that it said now go down 1 row, backwards 2 columns, and select that cell. And now I'm done. Stop recording. Couple of false starts there. I think we finally got it. Now, these are right now, we've got 2 different macros. So go ahead and come to your developer tab, use relative references. I'm sorry, Visual Basic for applications. And I just want, I want to turn these 2 into 1. So where it says end sub to stop the sub procedure before, I don't want to end. I don't want to start the new one. I'm just going to delete the end of the new. So get rid of that line, get rid of this line. I don't leave those comments in there either. And now it's just 1 macro. It's the one that I started. So it's just going to do that process that we did. It's going to go and cause that query to refresh and wait until it's done coming back. Then we're going to go find the cell that says price earnings ratio, trailing 12 months, activate that cell, select 1 to the right of it, and go through and do it. So now, if I'm on American Express, I should be able to press Control Shift P, and it should go through and pull that data in. There it is. Control Shift P, we'll get the next one. Now, if I only have 8 tickers, I'm done. I'm going to press Control Shift P 8 times. But if I've got 800, what's the problem? My pinky is going to get tired. I'm pressing Control Shift P. What I really want to do is to start at the top and do them all until it's done. You ready to do that? We can't record ourselves doing this. What we're about to do in programming lingo is called a loop. We're going to make a loop. So let's do it. Now, I could build this loop around this code that's right here. I could just kind of integrate this loop into this, but you know what? I kind of like this one procedure just the way it is. Like, this is pretty useful. I just want to get just the one. I like that. And I want to have a different sub procedure that gets me to run them all. So that's what we're going to about to do. There's a question here?
Do we need to change the EPS to a search thing in our code? Because it gave us the date.
Oh, interesting. Why is it giving us a date?
So as things change, the format can carry over from the prior run.
Yeah, so let's look here. So it pulled this data in. Yeah, so it moved it to no, let's see, moved it to a different.
The cell's format is changed.
Yeah, this cell is formatted as a date. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the. Now the truth is, this is formatted as a date, but it is. I could change this to general. So how would I do that? Home. I don't know how to do this. Where is it?
Right there. Where's this custom?
Custom general, and that'll put it back to the way we want. But when I do the copy, it's doing that. So let me just go ahead and just kind of do that same thing here. So my guess is it looked at 12.25 and thought that's Christmas. That's 12.25. And so when it came in, it formatted that way. We could, I don't think we'll have time, but we could actually make sure that it formats it into general. We could, in fact, I will leave that as an exercise for the interested student. But you could record yourself setting the code to general and then just copy that line and put it in there. So after it pastes it in, it makes it general. Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to come and delete our stock info. And so I have just the one in here. And I'm going to write a completely new macro from scratch. So I'm just going to type it in, sub. I'm going to call this get all data. When I hit enter, it's going to say, hey, you forgot the parentheses, put those parentheses on, you need an end sub, put that in for me. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell this just to do exactly what stock data does. And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say call stock data. So now these two procedures do exactly the same thing. So stock data goes and does that. Get all data just says go do what stock data does. But what I want it to do, I want it to do it over and over and over. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap around that. In fact, let me do this. Let me first make sure I've got the right sheet. So I'm going to copy these two lines here. I'm going to bring these lines up. I want to make sure that I've got my ticker sheet selected. So step one, make sure the right sheet is selected. Step two, I'm going to get them all. So I want to start on A2, right? So that's, I'm saying, hey, select the ticker sheet and select that cell. So when I run all of them, I'm saying, make sure you're on the right sheet, go to the very top. Question.
Your sheet should say tickers, not ticker.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it would not work with ticker. I'm going to change that to say tickers. Thank you. And capitalization doesn't matter here for the name of the sheet. So even if I got the capitalization on, but the spelling, it is spelling sensitive. Okay, so now it's going to get stock data, but I want it to get stock data over and over again. And so what I'm going to do is before I get to the call stock data, I'm going to say do. And you can see I'm tabbing things in just because I want the sub to end sub. I want that to really stand out. That's a block. Same thing here with this loop. Everything that's a part of this loop, I want to stand out. So everything that's inside the loop, I'll space in. Do just says, hey, here's the end of the beginning of the loop. And the keyword loop says, go back to the prior do. Okay, this is a particular kind of loop called an endless loop. I've given no way out of this loop. So how long is this loop going to execute? Forever. Forever is a really long time. It will not run forever. It will run until there's a really unexpected occurrence, like there's a power failure, or someone turns off the computer, or there's a nuclear holocaust, or the second coming. So if something really unexpected happens, this is gonna run. In this case, what does this macro do when it runs stock data? It moves the cell down. It moves the cell down. Eventually, 1.04 million iterations later, it's going to be on the very last row of the workbook, and I'm going to say, move the cell down. What's it going to say? Error, can't do it. And that's what would cause the code. I don't want to wait for 1.04 million execution. It would take months to get there. Months. So I got to give it another way out. And so I'm going to do this. I'm going to do until, and we're going to have a whole day where we talk about loops. But at this point, just believe it. Until active cell dot value is equal to, and I'm going to put quote, quote. So two quotes next to each other. Do until. I got to spell until right. UNTIL. Do until active cell equals quote, quote. So remember, if I was looking for some text, it would do until the active cell's value equal high. I want it till it's empty. There's nothing in it. So that's kind of our simplest way to get there. There's other ways to get there. That's our simplest way to get there. And so now if I run this, it should, I'm going to reduce this so I don't have as many so you can actually think we're out of time. In fact, I'm going to do one more thing here. On my developer tab, I'm going to come in here to where it says this little toolbox here. And I'm going to bring in a button and just put the button on. So it says form controls. You want to drop that down, form controls. This top one is a button. I'm going to click and then draw that onto here. And say, what do you want to run? I want to run get all data. And make a button, and it will let me change that, to say just get data. I'll click off of it, and that button now is ready to go. So now when I click on that, it is going to activate that sheet. It's going to take me up to the top, and it's going to do that over and over and over again until it runs into a blank cell. And we'll see it with all of the data here when it runs right about now. Right about now. Now. And so it brought in all the information and stopped when it got to a blank cell. And by the way, while this runs, I'm going to go get a ham sandwich. And so I would really like Excel to send me a text message when it's done so I can know it's time to come back and get to work. Can we do that in Excel? Yeah. Am I going to show you how to do that in Excel? Not today, but I will before the end of the semester. All right. That's it for today. Thanks for coming. Class dismissed. Only 2 times.
I just have one, but I lost it. And the way of doing it is randomly pick a number from 1 to 5. So I was just wondering, is there an easy way to,
Get the dice going to different positions.
well, I can get it to go into different positions, but I cannot completely randomize. I randomize the first one, and from there, I can just go, for example, the 16, I can go 16, 17, and then I go back to 1 and I go into the 15. But I was just wondering, is there any way to say randomly pick one number and then randomly pick a second number, but don't pick the number that we already picked?
Yeah.
Is there in the book or no?
It's not.
Okay.
So, real quick, I'm trying to do it. So, it's all about arrays. So you've got an array.
Yeah.
It has all of the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
You make
dice.
all of the dice.
Yeah, I have a 2D arrays, which each array, yeah,
You have how many arrays? Yeah.
2D arrays.
Two-dimensional array, okay.
Yeah.
So, a little easier if you have just a one-dimensional array, you put all 6 characters in one cell.
Okay.
Instead of 6 cells.
Yeah.
But let's imagine you have it all in one cell.
Okay.
So let's say you pick a number between 0 and 24, which would be the set. Think of it like this. Then read those out, pick one of those characters, put it in the cell. You're
Yeah.
done with that. Read the last one, the 24th one. Put it just right over the top of that one. And the next time, the random number between 0 and 20. Pick that one. Use that one. Take the bottom one out, put it in there, and then the next time, you're looking for one more row.
Okay.
So you're picking one out, you're done with it, you're bringing the bottom one back into play, and then you're searching one smaller.
I see. That makes sense. Yeah.
That's kind of the cleanest way. There's other ways to do it. That's the point of explaining.
Okay.
I think it's my favorite.
Okay. I think, yeah, thank you.
I work for a tax office, like a small one, and they do like personal tax returns, and a lot of the time is spent just taking stuff off PDFs that you scan from like their W-2s, 1099s, that kind of stuff, and just taking that and entering it into our software. I was wondering if there's a way that kind of like this,
PDF.
so that Excel would just go into like a PDF and say, this is a W-2, look for this one number in the W-2 and then put it onto Excel, so you don't have to open all the PDFs.
You have to open PDF.
Okay, you have to.
You open, you have to.
So this.
You can't have it automatically do it.
No, you might be able to.
So.
There may be a way to do this exactly what you're talking about.
But it's really complicated.
Yeah, there's a simpler code. And what you can do is, there are converters out there that will convert PDFs to text.
Let's get.
Yes.
You can convert to a text, so you can use exactly the same.
And so you're.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if it's
And so
if they scan that paper document to make it into a PDF, you're suffering.
Because you can't pull out.
But if it's actually was like printed to that, which, if you're getting it electronically, it probably wasn't scanned.
Which is
Probably.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's what then you might be able to do. So yeah, step 1 would be get that converted into text. And there's probably an automated way. to
you
do
probably even use your iPhone because they've added a feature on your camera. If you hold it up to like some text, it will pull it from anything.
Oh, yeah, so if you can do optical character recognition there, yeah, that's dangerous. Because it might get number wrong.
Yeah, and that's a big deal.
Number wrong is a big deal for you.
Yeah, that's why it's more to cut down on the data entry part and just, I'm gonna do it anyways, go through and check like 2 or 3 eyes have to see, people have to see it to make sure it's done correctly, but just to cut that whole data entry side out of it. Okay, cool, that's all I need. Thank you.
Question.
Yeah. I'll show you. So that's the whole purpose for this blog. Now you can get there from learning. So there's a link to this blog on.
He goes over that.
Currently, log into it.
So.
First day of the schedule and learning suite. It's like
Oh, yeah, that's what it is.
files and videos for this course. That is a link to this blog, but it's just vba-course.blogspot.com.
Okay.
And
So
so,
it's the same thing
Yeah,
you're going through.
so if we look at today's day, coordinating macros, here's the stuff that we use to get going.
Yeah,
And then the class video is due Monday, January 23rd by 4:45. If that time rolls around and I haven't posted the video, this thing turns into a button that if you press, it sends me a text message to remind me to it.
So it's
I will
gonna be at
forget-
4:45 today.
Yeah,
and it's not
I will
posted.
forget 3 or 4 times during the semester. So those buttons are really helpful too, even though I usually can't. When that happens, I usually have to wait till I get back to school to do it. But I did the same thing last semester. So if you want to look at it right now, you can come to recording and editing. And there's the video, and there's the file.
So how do I know that September 7th is the same topic that we covered?
Because if you look at ours today, it's recording and editing. If I come down here, recording and editing.
Okay. makes sense.
And then the color, when the color changes, it's a different term.
And then how is it aligned with the online book?
So,
If I was like reading the online book and following.
yeah, our online book doesn't do this. It does talk about recording, editing macros. I think it does do an example similar to this.
Okay,
So yeah, I think.
so it's.
And I'm pointing you to that here because it'll be the chapter. So chapter 2, recording and editing macros. So this chapter 2 is referring to chapter 2 in the online text.
Okay, so today, okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah, so that was 2016 that they did that. And things might have changed a little bit.
Okay,
So the ideas will be there, might not work exactly the way it's.
yeah, this is where.
Yep.
I'm very lost from. Let me watch the video. I'm lost from after just doing this. That's right. I mean,
Yeah, so you want to get to your immediate window, so choose. View. Choose a view. No, you need to be on this, you know. Choose view. What was it? So very good. I think the menu was on. So I'll come back to. Yeah, that wasn't the same menu we had. Oh my God. Immediate menu. Okay, so that's the code that we then recorded.
wait, what do you mean?
So, no. So the whole idea here, what we're doing today is we're recording ourselves doing these steps, and it's generating this code. If you look. Yeah. Stop the shit.